Liquid Bass. What's up, dogs? It's Cameron with Venus Theory, and today we're here to talk about the Liquid Drum and Bass Reese bass. And this is a very, very popular request. After I decided to sit down and make this video, kind of look back through comments and messages and stuff, and I've actually gotten this request about 2 or 3 times a week for the past 2 months. So I figured it was about time I got around to doing this. So today is a big shout out to Liquid DnB, who was asking me about this sound on Discord. So I figured it was about time I settle this once and for all and actually make this tutorial. So before we dive in, a couple things to keep in mind. I am not a DnB producer, and I don't claim to be. So, you know, your mileage with the sound may vary. However, this is basically what this sound is. And it's one of those sounds that I feel like people tend to overthink. And I'm guilty of this a lot myself, where, you know, I hear a sound and I want to try and recreate it, and I end up just way overcooking it and totally missing the mark. So this is a pretty simple patch overall, but I, think it's time to kind of settle this so that you guys can take this patch and run with it and start to really, utilize this sound in your own music. And if you do utilize it, let me know. Drop me a link to your SoundCloud track or whatever, and I'd love to check it out. So let's dive into Cubase and get started.
All right, so today we're here to talk about the Liquid DnB Reese bass. And if you're already not sure what I'm talking about, it's this sound right here. So this is a pretty popular request, as I mentioned, so I figured I would make this not only 1, but 4 different synthesizers and show you how it's done. So let's go ahead and take a look at Massive first, because after listening to quite a few tracks and finding one of 3 tutorials on the face of the earth that covered this sound, it seems like everybody just really likes to use Massive for this. And that's kind of why I decided to do this video, is because there's really not a whole lot of tutorials on this. So in Massive, let's go ahead and take a look. There's a couple things I didn't hear that I didn't actually end up using, so we're just going to ignore those, like the phase here, but we will go through everything else. So oscillator 1, 2, and 3. I used the sine square here, square saw 1 and square saw 1. This one is set all the way to 0, so that's a sine wave. This is a square wave. This is a saw wave. On oscillator 2, the intensity is about halfway, and amplitude-wise, we have 100%, about 70-ish%, and 70-ish% as well. Everybody goes down an octave, and then oscillator 2 and 3 are slightly detuned. That's really all there is to it. These all route into filter 1 here. This is set in series, so it's just going to go through this first filter, and I'm outputting the mix 1 here, which goes out. That's really all there is to this. Filter 1 here is set to scream. The cutoff is about halfway. Scream is a little under halfway. Resonance is up about 1/4 of the way. Then I got into the modulation stuff here. So envelope 2 is tied to the pitch of oscillator 1, 2, and 3 by 1 octave. The attack is 0. Decay is pretty short. Feel free to mess with this value. And the level, meaning sustain, is 0 and no release. This provides the initial boom to the bass, as well as modulates the filter here to give it a little bit more high end on the initial attack to make the bass kind of kick a little harder, very similar to how you would synthesize an 808. Then this goes into sine shaper here, about 30% on both the dry, wet, and drive. This goes into classic tube over here. I don't think I changed anything except dry, wet. Maybe I moved the drive down, I'm not sure. So those are the settings. Chorus, I just moved the dry, wet up a little bit. This is really where that kind of width in the sound comes from. This goes into EQ with a boost to the low shelf and a boost to the high shelf. So if you do decide to open up this filter more, there's just a bit more high end overall. This goes into more modulation here. So what I did from here is LFO 5 and 6. I tied these to the amplitude of oscillator 2 and 3. So LFO 5 here is oscillator 3, 6 is going to oscillator 2, and it modulates it by about that much. So feel free to play with this. This is just to kind of provide a little more movement to the sound overall. So for the oscillators here, I do in the voicing tab have monophonic enabled, unison value of 3. Pan position is on and set over here to make it a bit wider. And then in the oscillator tab, this is my glide time, so just under 50%. And that's really all there is to it. So once that's done, it should give you something like this, which already sounds really, really close. So what I did from here, distortion, just a very, very small boost. This stage isn't really necessary. I just did it because if you do use distortion, I mean, very, 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 very small boost or drive, tone of about 80% or so, just to shave off some high end. The important part of this sound comes from soft clipping. So I use the Cubase soft clipper. Any soft clipping compressor or whatever you have will do. And I actually did 2 stages of soft clipping here. So I just let this overdrive by about 4 decibels or so. This feeds into SSL comp stereo from Waves. So this is Ableton's glue compressor, is also Cytomic's The Drop. So any one of those will do. And all I did is just crank the makeup, and that provides soft clipping. This goes into tube compressor. I just use this to compress pretty hard by about 15 dB or so, and set the mix to 100%, and then drove the output down just a touch from where it is by default. This is just to make the sound a bit quieter overall, because after all this soft clipping and stuff, it gets really damn loud. A little bit of drive, a little bit of character. If you don't have Cubase, any LA2A emulation will do this. So Waves CLA2A or any other one that you have will do the exact same thing. This goes into C4 stereo, which is just a multi-band compressor. This is just the default setting. I just drove up the low end, the high end, and then the super duper high end. So OTT or Ableton's multi-band compressor will do the exact same thing. The gate here is because SSL comp has a bit of noise, and I didn't want to go through and disable the analog setting on all of these because they all have the exact same treatment except silence. The only difference here being I have a chorus enabled. Those are the settings if you want that. And then frequency is just an EQ, and that's just acting as the low pass for the sound, because that's really all there is to this, is take some saws, detune them, and low pass. So just to kind of breeze through these here, silence is just a sine, and then in the B section is 2 saws that are detuned with the fine knob. That's really it. Diva used the dual VCO here, cascade filter, and the high pass filter in post to boost the low end, and this is just a sine and a saw here. That's really it. Serum, this guy analog bass drum sine, and then the initial saw wavetable, 2 unison voices detuned by about that much. Low pass filter 18, touch of drive going on there, fat about halfway. The effects section, I have the tube distortion here, a little bit of the hyperdimension, and compressor going on, and that's really it. So just to show you guys kind of the differences in the sound, I will go ahead and play through this loop and just play the different synths, so you can kind of A/B them yourself and decide which route you would like to go, because as I mentioned, you can do this in pretty much any synthesizer that has a low pass filter. So let's just play through this now. So yeah, that's really all there is to this sound, and honestly, based on these 4 synths, I'd love to hear which one you guys thought sounded the best, because they all sound pretty good to me. However, I do think Diva really won this round for a really nice, deep, and wide feel to the whole bass. So other than that, that's really all there is to this.
And that's it for this video, guys, so thank you for watching, and I hope you learned something. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.